Veronica Lake's hairstyle was so dangerous it had to be banned by the US government. The blonde bombshell, who defined 1940s glamour, created a look so popular that millions of women copied it until factory workers started getting their hair caught in war machinery. But the real shock isn't that her trademark peekaboo style nearly sabotaged America's war effort. It's what happened after she gave up her famous look to help her country. Picture this. It's 1962, and you're having a drink at the Martha Washington Hotel bar in Manhattan. Your waitress brings over your cocktail. She's blonde, tired-looking, maybe in her 40s. You probably wouldn't give her a second glance. But if you looked closer, you'd realize you were being served by one of Hollywood's biggest stars from the 1940s, someone who once earned millions, whose hairstyle was so dangerous the US government had to step in, and who inspired the look of Jessica Rabbit. Her name was Veronica Lake, and her fall from grace was more devastating than any movie plot. Veronica Lake wasn't born a star. She started as Constance Frances Marie Okelman in Brooklyn, 1922, in a working-class family where her father worked for an oil company. But when she was just 10 years old, her father died in a horrific industrial explosion in Philadelphia. Her mother remarried and moved the family to Montreal, where Constance was sent to an all-girls Catholic boarding school. Here's where things get disturbing. She was expelled and diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic as a teenager. Her mother, desperate for a better life, dragged the family to Hollywood when Constance was just 16. The transformation from troubled teenager to movie star happened almost by accident, and it's one of the most bizarre success stories in Hollywood history. During a 1941 screen test for the film I Wanted Wings, Constance kept having her long blonde hair fall over one eye. She thought she'd ruined her chances, but the producer loved the look. That accidental hair drape became the peekaboo style that would make her famous. They renamed her Veronica Lake, and overnight she became one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. At just 4'11", she was perfectly matched with the famously short Alan Ladd, and together they became one of the decade's most popular film couples. But here's where the story gets absolutely wild. Veronica's hairstyle became so popular, it nearly sabotaged America's war effort. When World War II broke out, millions of women copied her look. Factory workers across the country were showing up to ammunition plants with their hair hanging over one eye, just like their idol. The problem? Their hair kept getting caught in machinery. Women were losing fingers, production lines were shutting down, and some workers were even getting seriously injured or worse when their loose hair got tangled in equipment. The situation became so dangerous that Life magazine reported on the machinery accidents, and the US War Production Board officially considered the hairstyle a menace to the war effort. The government did something unprecedented. They asked Hollywood's biggest star to change her look for national security. In 1943, federal officials approached Veronica and begged her to publicly abandon the peekaboo style. She agreed, cutting her hair and even filming a public service announcement called Safety Styles, where she demonstrated safer hairstyles for factory workers. The new look was called the victory roll because it made a V shape when seen from behind, symbolizing victory in choosing country over vanity. Women across America followed her lead, and machinery accidents dropped significantly. But cutting her hair was like Samson losing his strength. Almost immediately after changing her trademark look, Veronica's career began to crumble. Her 1944 film, The Hour Before the Dawn, was a disaster. Audiences actually laughed at her terrible German accent when she played a Nazi spy. The magic was gone. Movie executives started seeing her as difficult to work with, and roles became scarce. By the 1940s, the woman who had been one of Hollywood's highest-paid actresses was struggling to find work. The industry that had built her up was now tossing her aside. By 1952, she had made her last major film. The next few years were a blur of failed comeback attempts, cheap horror movies, and increasingly desperate situations. After her third divorce in 1959, Veronica left Hollywood forever and drifted to New York City. The woman who once commanded huge salaries was now living in the all-women's Martha Washington Hotel, struggling to pay her $190 a month rent. To make ends meet, she took a job as a cocktail waitress in the hotel's downstairs lounge, working under the name Connie de Torth, so no one would recognize her. Here's the most heartbreaking part. She worked that bar for years, serving drinks to customers who had no idea they were being waited on by a former movie star. Night after night, she'd mix cocktails and serve appetizers to people who might have once paid to see her in theaters. Her coworkers didn't know who she was. The customers treated her like any other waitress. The woman whose face had once graced magazine covers and movie posters was invisible, forgotten, serving drinks to survive. In 1962, a New York Post reporter happened to be drinking at the hotel bar when something about the blonde waitress seemed familiar. He asked her, "Have you always been a waitress?" Her response was devastating. "No, I was a movie star." The story made headlines across the country, shocking Americans who had assumed she was living comfortably somewhere. Fans sent her money, which she returned out of pride, insisting she wasn't destitute. But the damage to her image was done. Everyone now knew that Hollywood's former golden girl was working a minimum wage job. The newspaper story did lead to a few television appearances and a small role in an off-Broadway revival, but nothing could restore her former status. By the late 1960s, Veronica's paranoia had intensified. She was convinced the FBI was following her and tapping her phones. People who knew her during this period said the once beautiful star looked like a worn-out mess, appearing decades older than her actual age. The alcohol had ravaged her appearance so severely that when reporter Sue Cameron interviewed her in 1970, she was shocked to find a woman who looked like a cleaning lady and appeared to be in her 70s when she was only 47. Veronica's final years were spent in isolation, estranged from her 3 children and living in cheap hotels. She managed to write an autobiography in 1970, but it did little to improve her financial situation. Her last film role was in a low-budget horror movie called Flesh Feast, where she looked haggard and unrecognizable. By 1973, years of heavy drinking had destroyed her liver. She was hospitalized in Burlington, Vermont with hepatitis, but doctors missed that her kidneys were also failing. On July 7, 1973, Veronica Lake died alone in that hospital bed at age 50. She had no money, few friends, and her children hadn't spoken to her in years. Think about this for a moment. A woman whose hairstyle was so influential the government had to intervene, who inspired countless imitations and even animated characters like Jessica Rabbit, ended up dying broke and forgotten in a small Vermont hospital. Her story reveals the dark side of Hollywood's golden age. When stars were commodities to be used up and discarded, it also shows how untreated mental illness and addiction can destroy even the most successful lives. The peekaboo girl who once captivated millions became a cautionary tale about fame, beauty, and the price of being a commodity in Hollywood's machine. Veronica Lake's life reminds us that the glamour we see on screen often hides profound human struggles. Behind every iconic image is a real person dealing with real problems, and sometimes those problems are bigger than the fame can fix.